So this section is 1.1, points and lines as locations. So the first thing I'm going to have you guys do is look up these two definitions in the book. So the first one, Euclidean synthetic geometry, is on page 8, and then distance between 2 points is on page 9. So look those up and jot them in, and I'll read them to you here. So Euclidean synthetic geometry is description of a point, and their description of a point is an exact location. Okay, so we're going to talk about some different types of geometries, and how they describe a point and how they describe a line are not always going to be the same. So description of a point for Euclidean synthetic geometry is a point is an exact location, and then their description of a line is a set of points extending in both directions containing the shortest path between any two of those points on it. Okay. And then the next one there, distance between 2 points. So this one they're going to give us kind of a little equation to use for this. So it says the distance between 2 points on a coordinate-sized line is the absolute value of the difference of their coordinates in symbols, the distance between the 2 points with coordinates, and then they show this in the book here. Okay, so these lines are basically absolute value lines. Kind of what they do is if you've got a negative value in there, it makes it a positive value. It's always, absolute values are always the distance away from 0. But you could also use, if you take the two numbers that you're given and subtract them, and then you square that value and then take the square root, that'll do the same exact thing, because basically you just can't have a distance that's negative. So if I was going to drive from Clarence to Stanwood, I wouldn't say I'm going -5 miles, I would just say I'm going 5 miles. Okay. So we're going to go through some examples here. The first one is just with a number line, so it's probably, this one you could probably count out and go, okay, you know, I know there's 5 spaces there, 5 spaces there, 5 spaces there, so it totals out to 15. But for the purpose of this, we're going to use these different formulas. So the first one we've got there for the distance between point M and point N, we can take those values, so -5, put it inside our absolute values, minus, and then our other value for N is 10, put that in there. So then how absolute values work, basically you take the numbers inside of them and do whatever it says to do. It's kind of like parentheses, you do whatever's inside parentheses first. So you would take -5 minus 10, which would be -15. And that would still be inside your absolute values. And then -15 would be 15 spaces away from 0 on the number line. So the absolute value of -15 is just 15. Okay, so you could use that method for this. You could also use where you take the two numbers, subtract them, and then square that value, and then take the square root. So if we do that, we'd have square root of, and we'd have -5 minus 10 squared, and really you could put the values in any order. You could do 10 minus a -5, and then you would just get a positive 15 for either of these, and that would be fine too. That's kind of one of the reasons they have you put those absolute values there, or do this other method to get rid of those negatives. Okay, so if we keep going with this, we'd have -5 minus 10, so we'd get -15 again. And then we'd have to take, and we want to square -15, which comes out to be 225. And then after we take the square root of that, we get back to 15. Okay, so either one of those values, or either one of those ways, will get you the same exact value. Or if it's small enough numbers, you could make a number line and count out the amount of spaces there. Okay. A real life situation when this might come up, say I need to measure something and I only have a broken ruler. Okay, so I have a broken ruler here, and say I just have this half of it. So say I have the half that doesn't start at 0. Okay, well I've got a 2-inch line here, and I know it's 2 inches because if I take the first half of the broken ruler, measures out to be 2 inches, right? Well, I could also take this ruler and go, okay, I know between 7 and 9, that's the same exact distance, right? So really, you could use that broken ruler to measure, and you just don't start at 0. Okay, so that's kind of a similar concept to what we're thinking here, because if we take those two values, so like 0 and 2, we plug them into our distance deal here. So if we did 0 minus 2, that'd be -2. take the absolute value, we get 2. Now if you do the same exact thing with 7 and 9, so 7 minus 9 also gives us negative 2. And then we take the absolute value of negative 2 and get 2 as well. So that's kind of a real life example of when this kind of might come up. And you're probably not in real life going to be thinking, oh, I got to use the distance formula and all this other stuff. You're just going to be thinking about, okay, between 7 and 9 is 2 inches, and I can use that to help me out in a situation when I don't have a ruler that starts at the very beginning. Okay, so we'll do some more here. These ones are probably numbers that are big enough that you're probably not going to want to just draw out a number line for this to figure out the distance between the two. So we'll use our formulas here. So I could do absolute value of negative 45 minus 62. So if I do that, if you took algebra with me, a lot of times I'll change this subtraction to adding a negative like that. You don't have to, but that's how I like to do it. So then I go, okay, negative 45 plus negative 62, well, that would come out to be absolute value of negative 107, and then we'd want to take the absolute value of that, which would give us positive 107. Okay, and if you think about that in the concept of a number line, so say I did have a number line here, say I got 0 on there, negative 45, positive 62, well, I would basically be going to get from negative 45 to 0, that's 45. Then if I go from 0 to 62, that's 62. So to get my total distance there, just add them together. Okay, same kind of concept. Okay, let's try one with two negatives. So this one, we've got negative 60 and negative 57. So if we think about that, we do our absolute value, negative 60 minus a negative 57. Okay, and it's always going to be minus in between, always the difference of the two. So a lot of times what I like to do, I don't like subtracting by a negative like that, but I know subtracting by a negative is the same as adding the opposite. So I just change it to plus a positive. So then if I do negative 60 plus 57, that would give me negative 3. And then the absolute value of negative 3 would be 3. If you think about that on a number line, so say you got 0 there, negative 57, negative 60. This time they're both on the same side of 0, and they're only 3 spaces away from each other. So that one might be close enough that you could kind of visualize that one in your head. Okay, so we got one more here. So this one, they just give us letters, okay? So sometimes this will happen where they don't give us any numbers, they just give us letters. What you would do in a situation like this, same thing, you just take those values, so J and K, and put them into that same kind of formula you were using before. So you just do J minus K inside your absolute values, and that would be your answer. Okay, now you could also do, if you like the square root method, instead, well, I guess you could do it this way too, K minus J squared, or you could do J minus K squared underneath the square root, or you could flop those around too and put the K in front, but any of those would give you the same value, and that's all you would write for your answer. You wouldn't write any numbers down or anything like that. That would just be your answer. Okay, but the big thing when you're working with these distances, it's always going to be positive. So think about driving to Stanwood, and you're not going negative miles, you're always going to go a positive number of miles. Okay, so the assignment that goes with this is page 10. I want you to do 1 through 18 all, but you can skip 13 and you can skip 18B.